just 36% of people are able to accurately identify their emotions as they happen. We are not well equipped to do this. It's time for you to take a look at it yourself and make sure that you're one of the 36% and not the 64% that don't.
The majority of people think that emotional intelligence means being nice, which is not really what it is. So can you explain what it is?
Emotional intelligence in its simplest form, it's how well you understand.
Today's guest is Dr. Travis Bradberry, one of the world's leading experts on emotional intelligence. He holds dual PhDs in clinical and industrial psychology, and is the best-selling author whose books on emotional intelligence, including The New Emotional Intelligence, have sold over 5 million copies. Dr. Bradberry has worked with Fortune 500 companies across the globe, and now leads EQ innovation at LeadX, delivering cutting-edge emotional intelligence assessments and training at scale.
Is emotional intelligence something that you're born with, or can you learn it? Because people also think that you have it or you don't have it.
The beauty of the brain pathway responsible for emotional intelligence is that it is malleable and responsive to change. So you can absolutely increase your EQ if it's something that you don't possess.
You recently published a new book, The New Emotional Intelligence. You added quite a lot of information, 60 new super strategy, as you call them. What is the best of these 60 strategies that you have?
Well, I have a strategy in the book that's called...
Travis, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. My first question is really about, you helped so many people understand what is EQ, emotional intelligence. What was that moment in time in your life when you understood what emotional intelligence means, and how did you decide this is going to be the subject of your career?
Yeah, so for me, I first learned the term as an undergraduate, and I had a professor who introduced us to Peter Salovey's study. He's the reason, his study on emotional intelligence is the reason Dan Goleman's first book was called Emotional Intelligence. It was the first sort of notable academic paper. And so I came across that as an undergrad, and that just really spoke to me. Wow, being smart with your emotions, right? Emotions are such a huge driver of our behavior. This is fascinating. So that kind of tickled my interest. And I read Dan Goleman's book as well. And then I ended up, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, if I was going to pursue clinical psychology or an MBA. And I ended up doing a dual PhD program in clinical psychology and industrial psychology, which is the psychology of business. So emotional intelligence just made a lot of sense to me as a way to meld those two fields. So I started doing all my research in emotional intelligence. It's just something that spoke to me and was such a good fit for what I was studying that I was able to really do a lot of research when I was in that program.
Amazing. And we all talk about EQ. Everybody talks about EQ, but I don't think many people really understand it. It's one of these words that is used, and people don't stop and think what actually that is. And majority of people think that emotional intelligence means being nice, which is not really what it is. So can you explain what it is?
Yeah, sure. So, emotional intelligence in its simplest form, it's how well you understand your own emotions, not just in the moment, but also your tendencies, what triggers you, what kind of situations you thrive in versus those that challenge you. And it's also that in other people, your ability to understand not just the emotions of other people, but their experience, what the world looks like through their eyes. So people who are really in touch with their emotions are a very good read of themselves and others.
And is emotional intelligence something that you're born with, or can you learn it? Because people also think that, you have it or you don't have it, you can't learn it.
It's interesting because so many qualities are, the brain regions responsible for them are not malleable and not responsive to change. So IQ, for example, it's not what you know, it's IQ is the pace through which you assimilate new information. And IQ is relatively fixed. They've done longitudinal studies where they follow people age 5 to age 50, and their IQ doesn't change relative to their peers. So a lot of people make that assumption about emotional intelligence. The beauty of the brain pathway responsible for emotional intelligence is that it is malleable and responsive to change. So you can absolutely increase your EQ if it's something that you don't possess. And To further answer your question or answer it more directly, I just think it's something that, yeah, some people naturally have more than others. Some people grew up in homes where it was something that got a lot of focus. Some people grew up in homes where they had bad modeling in that regard. But the beauty of this being a malleable skill is you can change whatever kind of programming you have with you right now. You can change that and you can do something about it, and you can increase your EQ greatly.
You recently published a new book, The New Emotional Intelligence. That's version 2, right? You added quite a lot of information, 60 new super strategy, as you call them. So,
Yeah.
what made you add these new things? What discoveries in science led you to that? Can you talk about this a little bit more of what is new in this field?
Yeah. So, well, I wrote a book in 2009 that's been really popular. It's what they call, an evergreen bestseller. It just year after year after year, it does well. And that's wonderful. I'm really grateful for that. But wow, it's a long time since 2009, right? A lot of things have changed.
Yes.
And I feel that that book has become outdated. So it was just really an opportunity for me to say, this is where the field of emotional intelligence is at today. And these are all the things I've learned, right? These 60 strategies are 60 new powerful things that you can do to improve your EQ. A lot of that comes from the latest research in psychology and neuroscience, right? Brain imaging has improved a lot in the last 15 years. Their ability to understand how the brain works and how it drives your behavior has changed a great deal. So I share a lot of that in the book, but there's one more piece too, and that is this book includes my first new emotional intelligence test in 20 years. So the test I wrote before that comes with the other book it's really popular. And when you have a popular test, you really can't change it because lots of people use it. And if you alter an item or you alter some of the items, people throw a fit. So this gave me an opportunity to sort of wipe the slate clean and say, how can I to apply everything I've learned to make the best emotional intelligence test possible? And that's kind of what brought about this book.
You said that's a skill that can be learned. So, what is the approach? What should someone who is interested first to understand? Where is their emotional intelligence at the moment, and what can they do about it? So, what are the steps they should take?
Yeah. So the thing you need to understand is that your brain loves efficiency. And when you repeat behavior, it builds pathways that reinforce that behavior, meaning that you end up doing things without even thinking about them. So increasing your EQ requires that you form new pathways and that you let the negative pathways die off. So for example, if you're a yeller, when people frustrate you, could be at work, it could be your kids, it could be your partner. If you yell, there's a pathway that reinforces that. That's why you have this knee-jerk reaction. Learning that, having that self-awareness and deciding that when you feel that emotion, you're going to do something different actually causes that pathway to wither and die. So the neurons, they branch out to each other. That eases the flow of information that results in behavior that withers and dies, and a new pathway forms. So the way the book is structured and the reason there's these 60 strategies is I want readers to just focus on one or two things at a time that they're going to work on until they become habitual. And at first it's hard. You have to be really mindful and think about what you're doing. But as time goes on, you catch yourself doing these new things because your brain has formed a pathway and it's become a habit. And that's when you're ready to move on to a new one. So that's kind of the process by which you physically alter your brain. And granted, some of the strategies are going to speak to you and you're just going to pick those and work on them. But one of the fun things with the test is it analyzes your score profile and it tells you which of the 60 strategies will increase your EQ the most based on your profile. So it gives you 2 or 3 strategies to start with based on my expert analysis.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm thinking to take the test just to see what's going on with
Yeah.
myself. But so the thing is self-awareness. If somebody doesn't take a test, the self-awareness that you do certain things and you react to emotion in certain ways is the first step, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's the I think the most difficult step, right? Because people don't realize what they're doing. So, what is your advice there? What is the best way to understand yourself first?
Well, you want the most objective picture of your behavior that you can get. So assuming, I do everything I can in the book to bring that to the reader individually. So I give them the test, which objectifies their behavior. The test is actually, especially for a self-assessment, it's very difficult to fake good. So people end up lowering their scores, we find, when they try to choose what they think is the good answer instead of just being honest about themselves. Then there's some exercises you can go through. There's exercises in the book that are designed to increase your awareness of your emotions. And that's important. But there's another thing that the book recommends, and I think this is the most important, and that's to get feedback from other people, right? That's to find someone who you think is a high EQ person in your life and let them know what you're working on, what you see, the way I see it, this is what I need to work on. These are the 3 things I'm doing, and get their feedback and see what they think. Because there's a great deal of research that shows the most accurate representation of our behavior is not what we see, but it's what everybody else sees.
And that's very valid, especially when you're in a team setting and you're trying to achieve a goal. So what are the real world examples of the best approaches for being connected with others in a team settings to achieve a goal in the best possible way? What are some of the tools people can use?
I think that this really goes down to the social side of emotional intelligence and social awareness. Having a discussion amongst the group about what people's score profiles look like. So we suggest that you have a lot of group activities where, as a group, you don't need to show your scores to everyone if you don't want to, but you can talk about, hey, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is what I'm working on. That tends to create a common language amongst the group and a lot of group discussion. And that tends to alter the culture for the team, because the team now has this accountability around EQ, that this is something we're going to work on. And we've all revealed, what we should be working on, and we can hold each other accountable. So that's the biggest thing that I recommend there.
And if there is a resistance, because not a lot of people actually like to talk about this. What are their good sides and what are their bad sides, and how things work for them? How do we encourage this in teams?
You really have to make the business case for emotional intelligence. I actually have a section in the book that's dedicated to that. It's called The Business Case for Emotional Intelligence. And it's really to help people understand, look, this is a skill that moves the needle in the workplace. It improves individual performance. It also improves organizational performance. So my suggestion would be to have people read that, help them to understand, look, this is something that there's a great deal of research behind it that shows that it's important. So this is something we're going to work on. And that tends to create the accountability and the understanding, especially from the skeptics.
And what about leaders have to have this quality to be able to self-assess themselves and being connected with their feelings so they can manage others properly? What are some of the skills or habits that the best leaders do? In your experience, you've taught and trained so many people.
The best leaders understand that emotional intelligence is something that trickles down throughout an organization. So the tone that you set, the emotional tone that you set as a leader, actually impacts, it creates the environment that everyone follows. So great leaders, they're not just aware of themselves, but they're aware of how their behavior impacts other people. And they set a positive emotional tone. They actually move the needle for the entire group.
Okay, so given that emotions drive us, not logic, right? We are emotional beings. How can some lead with logic?
Yeah, well, I don't think you should lead with logic. I mean, I think logic should be a factor in what you do, but also your emotions and your intuition play an important role. And I think the ability to meld those two and combine them is the way to be the most effective. Yeah.
Today, if somebody's listening to you, what is the one thing they should do to just make sure they are approaching work with emotional intelligence, approaching their colleagues, etc.? What is one thing?
Well, the big thing is to increase your self-awareness, and that often requires leaning into some discomfort to learn new things about yourself. Could be things that you're doing well you're not aware of, but oftentimes it's things that you need to improve and do differently. So that's the biggest thing I recommend to people because it opens doors. I'm continually surprised or amazed how much successful people are willing to suffer to get ahead. They will put themselves through so much. But when it comes to increasing their self-awareness, they put the blinders on. And that's because we're taught that we can't change. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, that couldn't be further from the truth. So your ability to look at the beauty and the blemishes is a big indicator of your ability to improve your EQ.
Let's take a practical example, and it's June, so it's the time of mid-year performance reviews. Everybody's kind of talking to their one downs to talk about what they've achieved, how they've achieved. So, what are the things you would recommend? What is the best way to approach negative news or give negative feedback?
Okay.
And be
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's the best way to do it is to let people know that you have their best interest at heart, that there's a purpose behind it. I think that, negative feedback is hard to take when it feels mean and when it feels critical, when it's not trying to do something. But oftentimes in the workplace, these are performance reviews. These are intended to improve performance. So if you can frame it for the person in the context of their larger job and why it's critical to their performance and the performance of the organization, I mean, hey, everybody has things we need to improve. Nobody's perfect. So I think if you give it the right context, you can soften the blow for people.
and if you are accepting, so I'm sitting there and my boss is telling me things that are not pleasant to hear and they make me feel anxious. How do I control these emotions and come across as somebody who actually is willing to listen, etc. Even when deep inside I'm just really kind of thinking, oh my goodness, what is he saying or what is she saying?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to anxiety, it's really important to give yourself time to think. Anxiety can lead to a lot of sort of knee-jerk reactions because your nervous state is overstimulated. So I think it's kind of a two-step process. One, recognize that you're feeling anxious and be very aware of it. Be honest with yourself. Don't diminish that or try to dismiss it. And once you do, make sure you're just giving yourself a little extra time to think through what it is you're trying to interpret, what you're feeling, and try to take a more rational course of action in response.
What is your favorite self-check to manage emotions?
My favorite self-check is to check in with your body. And, we feel in our bodies. And a lot of times you have physical sensations in your body that are driven by emotion. So this is something that you can learn to do. Even sometimes your own emotions are influenced by other people. So there's a study in the book that was conducted at a university in the Netherlands where they took people they were blind because they had cortical lesions. So their eyes worked perfectly. They sent the signals to the back of the brain and the visual cortex couldn't process the information because of cortical lesions. And these people, they put them in front of computer monitors that displayed strong demonstrations of emotion. And they demonstrated the same thing that people with sight do. They would mimic the emotional state of what they saw on the screen. And the researchers were floored by this. They couldn't understand how these people without sight could see this. And they did further analysis of their MRIs, and they found that when you see something, as the signal travels down your optic nerve, it actually sends a signal to your limbic system, which means that you have an emotional reaction to what you see before you're even aware of what you're seeing.
Wow.
So your intuition, when you walk, and I know that just about everyone listening to this has experienced this. You walk into a room full of people and there's something going on. You know it, you can feel it, but you don't know what it is. You haven't been able to piece things together yet. So that aspect, that use of your intuition and how your own body feels can tell you a lot when you learn how to tune into it.
There is a lot of talk about journaling and meditation and other such tools to help you with your emotional intelligence. Are these working? And what is the best tool you think?
It's all about self-reflection, right? And getting in touch with what you're feeling. So I think the journaling is powerful. It works better for some people than others. I also think meditation is a great way to get in touch with your feelings. Again, some people more than others. Some people get really regulated when they go for a walk. You can just remove yourself from whatever your situation is in and go walk for 15 minutes, get your body moving. It gets your blood flowing. It affects how you think. I think the thing that I recommend is trial and error. Try to find the things that work for you. Don't be afraid to try things that don't work, right? Try different techniques, and there's a ton of them in the book, and you'll see what sticks. You'll see what really creates clarity for you.
So if, let's say, somebody is labeled too emotional, how should they react and what should they do? Is that, I mean, you've heard that, right? A lot of people say, oh, you're too emotional, especially at work. What's the approach then?
Well, there's two aspects of this, right? One is to consider the source of the feedback. You have to understand, is this accurate feedback? Is this someone that's trying to help me or someone that's just trying to be critical? And is it consistent? Is it something that lots of people see, right? Or is this just one individual? In the workplace, if everyone that reports to you or everyone in your team feels like you're too emotional, it doesn't mean that you're too emotional. It means you're too emotionally reactive. It means you're letting your feelings dictate your behavior. And, that's really the essence of emotional intelligence. You're not changing what you're feeling at all. You're feeling the exact same thing. You're just aware of it in a way that allows you to channel your emotion into producing the behavior that you want. So if people feel like you're too emotionally reactive, you learn ways to channel that emotion into producing different, more palatable behavior for those around you.
And if we talk about personal relationships, how does, I mean, it's very different than work. How does EQ shows up in personal relationships? What should we watch for, and what do we learn? What is the best of these 60 strategies that you have to
Yeah, well,
regulate?
sure. Well, a lot of it comes down to conflict and how you address conflict in your relationship. The thing is, the amount of conflict in a relationship has no bearing on the ultimate success or failure of a relationship. It's how conflict is addressed, because conflict is inevitable. And in the book, I discuss this. And the idea is, when you can approach conflict in a constructive manner, when you can try to meet in the middle. And the technique in the book comes from John Gottman's research, and it's called repairs. A repair is a moment where you pause in the middle of conflict and try to find common ground to bring the two of you together. So there's this idea that we don't see eye to eye, and it makes me upset. It's making you upset. But instead of escalating things and trying to win this battle, I'm going to try to win the war by bringing us together. So that repair technique is powerful. Another big one, and there's a whole strategy dedicated to this, and this works for relationships of all types, is to lose the battle to win the war, right? We get so caught up in trying to prove that we're right in the moment that we erode the overall quality of our relationship. People that are emotionally intelligent know when to step back and live to fight another day.
All right. So, what else? Give me some more techniques, because I'm sure that people are very interested in how to regulate emotions. Let's say in difficult situations at work, difficult situations at home, with kids. Anything that is some of your favorite techniques?
A big thing I focus on in the book is having a growth mindset. And that is seeing setbacks as challenges to overcome as opposed to failures. People that treat failure as a personal deficit tend to have much worse outcomes than people who treat them as challenges to overcome. So a lot of the book is focused on developing this sort of positive, growth-oriented mindset. Another thing is at home and talking to your spouse and your kids, and actually it really applies at work too, and that's talking so people will listen. And that means that you're tailoring your approach and what you're trying to say so that it lands, so that it's being delivered in a way that your audience is going to be receptive to it. So a lot of times when we're speaking, we're just thinking about ourselves. But people who are really effective communicators are able to think about themselves and their own message, and also what it's going to look like from the person they're speaking to. And they alter their approach as a result.
What about the future, and the future with AI in it? How is that? Is that going to make us obsolete, and what is going to be the impact on our emotional intelligence and connection with people? Given that a lot of the things that we are doing at the moment, as our tasks at work and even at home, will be done by AI.
Yeah, I'm of the age where it's kind of interesting, because the internet started getting pretty popular when I was finishing high school and starting college. So I've watched all these advancements in technology over the years. I mean, I remember, we didn't have cell phones like when I was 14, 15 years old, right? I've sort of experienced a lot of different. And what I see is there's layers and layers of technology that are being put between face-to-face human interaction. And the trouble is that our brains are still wired for human to human interaction. So we've gotten so used to, the telephone and the internet that, we have most of our conversations at work via text, right? It's a Teams
Yeah.
message or a text message. It's like we don't even FaceTime. We don't even have a visual
Yeah.
interaction with
True.
another person. And what I've seen in my son is 16, and what I'm seeing in his generation is just this: they're so used to technology that they're diving right in with AI. These kids have AI girlfriends already, and they like the fact that this AI, you can make them however you want them to be, even though it's not a real person. People are starting to use AI for therapy. And, again, it's just the question I ask is, how much are we going to let it diminish our capacity to have face-to-face interaction? I'm not necessarily looking for the best advice from a therapist. I want good advice, but I want real human empathy. And you're never going to get that with AI.
Yeah.
So we just have this sort of tendency to lean so hard into the technology, and then we find out later that it's, like cigarettes. It's not it's bad for us. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops. This technology is progressing really rapidly.
You mentioned about kids. I also have kids. They're boy and a girl, 15. They're 15. So the thing is that with their generation, because of COVID and because of technology, they are lacking social skills that much. Is there any way, is there anything in your book that can help them? Any kind of exercises that can teach them how to connect with people better? Because they really lack this. I mean, I can see it day
Absolutely.
in and day out.
Yeah, there's a lot in the book on that. There's material on likability, connecting with people, how to talk to people. What I find is that a really good strategy is one that may be mind blowing for one person and a good reminder for someone else. Because we all need these reminders. I mean, I've been writing about this stuff for 25 years, and so much of it as I'm writing, it's like, wow, I really should be doing that more. So I tend in the book to have more basic level stuff and more advanced stuff because I want everyone to do all of it. So yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think a lot of the younger generation could benefit from it.
You mentioned about likability. Can you talk a little bit more about that? So what is the way so we can come across more likable? And also, a continuation of the question is, we should not be that likable so people walk all over us. How do we do that?
Well, right. So, likability is a social awareness skill. It's about understanding what people like and presenting yourselves to them in a way that's going to allow connection. So it isn't abandoning yourself. You can be true to yourself and still be more likable because you approach people in a way that they're ready for. You know, a lot of times people mistakenly associate emotional intelligence with kindness, and there is a lot of kindness that comes with EQ, but not to the extent that you shouldn't be able to set a boundary. And I actually have a lot of material on that in the book around boundary setting, because boundary setting is critical to healthy relationships of all type, especially with the people you're stuck with, right? It could be a coworker, it could be your in-laws, it could be your kid. And your ability to set boundaries and get your needs met is important to the health of the relationship. So that's another big component of the book.
How do you set the boundaries in a way that you would be understood, especially at work? It's so difficult, especially somebody who is at the junior level and they want to set boundaries with somebody who is more senior than them, and it's frightening in many cases. I have been in this situation, and it's you have to get your courage really to set boundaries and say, well, that doesn't work with me. What do you recommend people do?
Well, there's two things. One, you need to know who you're dealing with. You need to have a really clear understanding of who this person is, what sort of boundaries are appropriate and have a chance at being received well. And then it's a matter of your communication and how clearly you communicate what the boundary is, why you're setting it, and why it's important to you. So, in the case of a junior associate dealing with a more senior person, it's a matter of establishing what they're willing to do, not willing to do on this job. And it could be because there's competing priorities with other senior folks that are assigning things to them. It could be an ethical issue where I'm going to set a boundary here because I'm not willing to do this task because it violates my moral compass. It's just a matter of understanding who this person is, why you're setting the boundary with them, and then just being absolutely crystal clear when you set it.
What about bullying at work? Is there any way this can be approached from emotional intelligence point of view to deal with a bully?
Yeah, some of my writing over the years on toxic people has been really well received. People show a lot of interest in that. So I have strategies in the book that focus on that, identifying different types of toxic/difficult types of people that you deal with at work, so that you can understand them and set those boundaries. I think a lot of bullying comes from people that they just have an approach that's kind of destructive and really hard on other people. So yeah, that's one of the things that I teach in the book, is being able to set these boundaries. But you really have to understand who you're dealing with. And that's why I address the 9 toxic types of people in the book, because the boundaries are going to be absolutely different with different types. I also do the same thing. There's a strategy on surviving a bad boss. So it's understanding the different types of difficult bosses. You've got the micromanager and the seagull manager, and you've got the robot, and all these different types of bosses that tend to engage in very stereotypical behavior. So when you understand who you're dealing with, you can use your EQ to have a more productive approach.
Can you give us several examples? So, for instance, let's take the micromanager, because that's the one that is very, very popular. I'm sure I say popular is not the right word, but how do you manage micromanager? Can you give me several easy things to do?
Well, the way you manage a micromanager is you're really managing up. So you need to understand what's important to them, and you need to be willing to deliver what you're willing to deliver. So you're not doing it necessarily because you think it's important. You're doing it because they think it's important. You also need to be able to set boundaries around what you're not willing to do. So if they're expecting you to conduct a process a certain way and you feel you can do it more effectively a different way, then you need to set that boundary if you're not willing to do it. So, I think a lot of people feel like they're at the mercy of micromanagers. And my strategy is to give them control and to make some decisions around what they are and aren't going to do, right? Because this person is your boss. You do want to please them if you want to stay in the job, but that doesn't mean you have to do absolutely everything they ask. You can make some choices.
Interesting to give them control. That sounds a little bit counterintuitive, given that they're micromanagers. So, what more can you give them?
Well, I'm giving control to the person they're supervising, right? Making choices around what it is you are and aren't going to do, and creating clarity around that. But the things you are going to do, doing them with enthusiasm, right? Because the micromanager takes the joy out of things. But once you've made the decision as to what you're willing to do and what you aren't willing to do, it's more empowering.
What else works well for somebody to kind of progress well within an organization? What makes somebody likable, but in the good sense? Somebody who set boundaries, etc. What kind of strengths and qualities we should aspire to get?
Well, I have a strategy in the book that's called Use Your Emotional Intelligence to Be Exceptional. And the idea is to be an exceptional employee, the kind of person that gets ahead, gets promoted. And the number one thing you can do, there's a lot, but it starts with being a problem solver. It starts by being the kind of person that doesn't wait to be instructed to do something. They recognize problems and they fix them immediately. They get right on it. People who are problem solvers get promoted. The other big one, and like I said, there's a lot of specifics, but the other big one is to be the port in a storm, right? Be the calm one in a crisis. When everyone is freaking out because, a major competitor just launched a surprise new product or whatever, the budget's getting slashed in your department, be the one person that's calm and clear-headed. It stands out. And it's a leadership quality, and it's something that tends to get people promoted into leadership positions. So these are the kind of skills I'm coaching people towards in the book.
How can you stay calm? If you have to teach somebody to stay calm and be in a storm, what should they do? how do you teach them?
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of the book, right? It's increasing your EQ. So it's having a really deep awareness of your own feelings and what's going on with other people. That equips you to do something different. Everyone else in the room, they're not working on their EQ. So they're letting their emotions drive the bus. They're having these knee-jerk emotional reactions. They're freaking out. They're running around like a chicken with its head cut off. You're different. You've read the book. You've taken the test. You've been doing the exercises, working on your emotions. You understand what's going on and what you're feeling, and you get this objective look at things. There's even a strategy in the book dedicated to this, which is like looking at your own life like it's a movie, right? You watch a movie, you watch this character take actions that you know are going to fail. You can see it. Well, if you can have that same kind of objective look at yourself, you can make those kind of really rational, well-informed choices that are unique from other people.
That thing with the movies, I can see how it can actually help, because when you see your emotions from a side, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I should not do this, and oh, I should do more of this. For great leaders, I mean, one of the top leaders you've worked with, what are the top qualities that made them great leaders?
It's some of these things we discussed because they are the type of behaviors that set a positive emotional tone inside the organization. And that's what I find these leaders to be. They are the port in a storm. They're the calm one in a crisis. They are the ones that have the growth mindset. They see setbacks as challenges to be overcome. Great, here's another obstacle in our path, and we're going to beat this just like we beat the last one. They tend to have a lot of positivity. They tend to see the good in things. And positivity actually lowers the levels of stress hormone in your body. So you actually feel less stressed when you can focus on the positive. But again, it all comes back to setting that emotional tone. And that's what I see the real high performing leaders doing.
Okay, so if you can leave people today with just one truth about emotional intelligence that could change everything for them, what would be that one thing?
That one thing. So like I said, I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and more than 10 million people have taken my emotional intelligence tests. And the finding that holds true over and over again, year after year, is just 36% of people are able to accurately identify their emotions as they happen. We are not well equipped to do this. We all have a ton of room for improvement. So it's such a big differentiator to success and performance that it's time for you to take a look at it yourself and, make sure that you're one of the 36% and not the 64% that don't.
Great. Thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
Where can people find your book and the test and everything?
Yeah, so my book is on Amazon. All English language booksellers have it, and we're starting to do the international editions. Different languages are starting to be bought and going into production. But yeah, most people, it's on Amazon. It's on Audible as well. So yeah.
Great. Anything else that you want to say? Any other question just to help you?
Well, if another thing, if people are looking for the 360 feedback or emotional intelligence training, I work with an organization called LeadX. So it's leadx.org. And that's actually where you go to that site to log in to take the test when you buy the book, and your passcode, you use your passcode and you log in there. But there's also some information on 360 feedback and training programs and, different ways that you can apply this in your workplace. I just find that a lot of people to say, wow, I got a lot out of the book. Now I wish my company would do this. Well, we have a method for that. You can get certified in our training program, and you can deliver the training program yourself inside your organization.
Great. Thank you very much for this interview. And I'm just generally going to read the book. I'm very interested in EQ. It was something that was in the center of throughout my career and my life, actually. So that's a topic I'm very, very interested in. We'll definitely take the test, the new test.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Glad to
Thank
hear
you
it,
very
yeah.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Please hit subscribe to the show and leave a review or comment about how you find this episode.